Good evening, everyone. This is John Asher here in Leesburg, Virginia, welcoming everyone back to our second fireside chat with Lyndon LaRouche here, who'll be on with us shortly here in Virginia. And this is occurring at an extraordinary moment in human history. And so I'm very grateful that everyone is able to join us again this evening. If this is your first time on the LaRouche Activist Conference call, I'd like to welcome you here this evening and give a welcome back to all of you who have been with us over a period of time. This is clearly a very high point, extraordinary point in the process that we've been carrying out of these calls for quite a long time. So I've just, as people are getting on now, where this is really the starting bell, but we have a kind of a tradition here that we give people, everybody, about 5 minutes at 9 o'clock to kind of pile onto the call. So while people are getting on, I want to point out a few things which are of tremendous significance on the website and related to activities we have coming up over the course of the upcoming days. First of all, I think in terms of political orientation in a statement, which I'm sure many of you have already emailed out to people, there is a very important lead item on LaRouche PAC website entitled "No Diversions. Next 2 weeks will decide the fate of mankind." And that title, along with that we are at war with the British Empire, very much is the, I'd say, theme of the discussion around which we called this conference call here this evening. So the focal point of our movement right now, as I stressed at the end of last week's call, and you have heard in various discussions on the website, is the upcoming conference that will be taking place in New York City a week from Saturday. That is Saturday, June 6th. It starts at noon, but I think the actual conference itself begins, I believe, at 1 o'clock. This will be streamed nationally, but I would encourage all of you who are in driving distance of New York, or even maybe longer distances, who might consider flying in or getting to New York City, that we are going for the best possible attendance at this conference next Saturday, in a week from Saturday in New York. This event is entitled "Decision Day for Humanity. The U.S. Must Return to its founding principles and join the BRICS alliance now." And you will see that the panels are described on the website. The first panel from 1 till 3, keynote presentation, "The Promethean Challenge Unfolds, BRICS a New Era for Mankind." Then a afternoon panel, "The American Revolution and the Battle Against the Bestial Conception of Man," including Bob Ingram, who is from the West Coast. He'll be flying in for this, who's written a recent crucial paper, "Manhattan's Struggle for Human Freedom Against the Slave Power of Virginia." And then you'll see on this that there is a evening music event as well. So I believe the part that will be live streamed will go from 1 o'clock till 5 p.m. Again, this is a week from Saturday. This is sponsored by the Schiller Institute, and there will be people there, supporters of the LaRouche political movement and the Manhattan Project, and I'm sure we'll hear about that more this evening. So again, I'd like to thank everybody for getting on here this evening. We have an extraordinary conference call. This is our second discussion in a row with Lyndon LaRouche, who will be on with us momentarily. And I'd like to welcome everyone back to this call who was on last week. And at 9:05 is when we begin the call, and we'll get underway. So I think the two things I pointed out, we have this critical statement from yesterday. We're in a fateful 2-week countdown, turning point in human history, and we're building for our intervention into this around the Manhattan Project, an event, a critical event coming up June the 6th, and that will be followed by an international event in Paris, France, the next week. And obviously this is preceding events coming up within the next month, which include the famous BRICS conference occurring in Ufa, Russia, which is in the first week or so of July. So I'm now going to mute here.
Unmuted.
So I think, Mr. LaRouche, are you there at the moment? Do you hear me? Okay. Lynn, do you hear me? If you do, can you say something?
You to do?
Okay, now I can hear you. All right. Now you're coming in. All right, so good evening, Lynn. This is John Asher here, the host of the conference call. And, of course, everybody on the call welcomes you back here this evening. People are still getting on, but we have a few hundred people on already, Lynn. And so I understand, Lynn, you might want to make a few preliminary remarks to our gathered supporters and activists here before we go into dialogue and questions. So if you have anything to say preliminarily here, why don't you go right ahead, okay?
Well, look, we got a little problem that got dumped in my lap this evening, early evening. Barbara Boyd gave a report and recommendation. And what has happened is that there was a operation by adversary forces, and we were trying to, or some of us were trying to find out who the adversary forces were and why they were doing it and how they were doing it. And quite recently, we were able to pinpoint those forces which were active and who were effectively weakening the financial resources of our organization here. So Barbara Boyd, who of course is the relevant person in this area for this managing of finances and so forth, has suggested that what we have to do is, in order to deal with this problem, we have to try to raise some funds within the organization and from it in order to try to beat off some of the really deadly threats, financial threats, which are hitting in this area. So I told them, they asked me to say something about it, and I said I will say something about it. I'll make a comment on this thing too, but it's very significant. The issue, which Barbara doesn't say explicitly, but she did say on other occasions earlier, the problem here was that we had a group of people who were operating as former or allegedly former members of our organization. And these people were all, we now determined, factually, these people were all actually agents of enemy forces. Some of them had been people who were recruited from our organization and all were otherwise using things to try to do damage to us, especially the Leesburg area. The other areas we don't have any specific problem of that type on our registration yet, but in this area we've had for several months a trend which wasn't outside forces meddling, and more recently we've been able to determine that more precisely. So that's the point. It's what the point that people have been presented to our organization is some of the people affected by this thing are saying we need to raise some direct money quickly for the general organization and from it in order to stave off a presently emergency crisis. And that's the report of her report, which she said to me this afternoon, late this afternoon. And I think the thing that she's saying is quite appropriate in a sense. But the point is our organization, the members here, for example, that's participating now, will have to judge how they want to approach this. But I think it's something we have to do. I don't know how we're going to do it. Barbara said implicitly she doesn't know how she's going to do it. And so I think this is the way we have to look at it. Anyway, I think otherwise, apart from that little piece of bad news, I think we're ready to go.
Okay, well, excellent. All right, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to turn on the question and A queue. and I believe that Lyndon LaRouche is prepared to take questions from any direction. I would just ask,
Q&A session started.
And I would ask people to please ask a question, since last week we had over 20 questions, and if you can stick to one question per individual, that will be very helpful so we can actually get to as many people as possible. Now, to get in the question and A queue, you can hit *6, and that will put you in the queue. And I think that, if you were on last week, you know that that Lynn covered a whole range of topics and about the entire international crisis that we're in today, our fight with the British Empire, and more. So I'm going to call on the first questioner here. All right, Lynn, here we go. All right.
I'm here.
Okay, I hear you. The first questioner, do you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can now. Go ahead.
Okay, great. This is Sarah from South Florida, and I was fortunate enough to hear last week's call, and fortunately enough, there were so many good questions. I didn't get asked last week, but I did contact the activists in Leesburg in regards to it, and I would just love to hear Lyndon LaRouche's response to this, is that we have the Greek default with the IMF and the EU coming up June 5th, and I think that it's perfect timing to demand Glass-Steagall be rammed through before July 4th, when July 5th is the actual legal default from the June 5th of Greece, because as the EU will start collapsing, there's quite a few countries, I understand, that want to get out the door along with Greece. The United States would be wise, in my opinion, to ram through Glass-Steagall before July 4th to protect her nation's assets. And I would just love to hear any remarks, ideas, responses.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it's rather simple. Of course, Glass-Steagall is absolutely indispensable. That if you don't include Glass-Steagall in reforming the system, you're not going to accomplish anything, because all the other features of the system would fail to meet the requirement. Now, let me just explain one thing about this, which is not generally taken up by our discussions, but they very much occupy my views on these matters. We're in a situation where we entered the 20th century. Now, people say that, well, that's a long time ago. Yeah, the year that year, and from there on. But the problem is that over the course, since the beginning of the 20th century, remember, when you work in the 19th century, you still had some of the greatest qualities of genius being generated in the trans-European area. The most famous names. What happened was that with the beginning of the 19th century, that is the year 1900 and 1901, that period, since that time, the moral and intellectual capabilities of the people of Europe, but particularly the United States, have been in a constant rate of decline. For example, in the whole 20th century, there was only one man as a qualified scientist who was ever supported. And guess who? Albert Einstein. No other so-called scientist was actually honestly competent as a scientist during the course of the 20th century. And after the 20th century had passed, and we were passing into the present century, things have gotten worse at an accelerated rate. So the point is, Glass-Steagall is a pivot, which is not just only the content of Glass-Steagall, but Glass-Steagall is an increment, an essential increment of the policy of returning to the economic policies of our presidency, that is of the United States. If you don't push Glass-Steagall and go from the start of it, you're not going to save this nation. You're not going to save our people. So Glass-Steagall is indispensable. There can be no substitute for Glass-Steagall. Anyone who doesn't agree on Glass-Steagall is either mentally ill or confused, very much confused.
Okay. All right. We're going to take another questioner up here. Okay.
Yep.
Hello. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I hear you. I hear something.
No. The questioner is not. I don't know if she's quite yet speaking. But if you're speaking, speak louder, please.
I don't know if it's me or not.
No. I can hear you now. Go ahead.
All right. It's Leontino Gorman from Albany, and we were lobbying for Glass-Steagall at the Capitol last Wednesday. So we certainly, we're very much committed. I think the other thing that really I am also concerned about how to generate jobs and manufacturing. I drove through Gary, Indiana, and it's a ghost town. And when I know I'm old enough to know what we were like when we produced, the cars. In fact, we invent the thing, and then China's making them right now. I need to know how to generate jobs in this country now.
Lynn, were you able to hear that?
It's a little bit weak, but I got it.
Okay, she basically said that she was asking, she drove through Gary, Indiana, and was commenting on how there was no manufacturing jobs, and she was asking, how do we generate manufacturing jobs now?
What we have to do, essentially, is very simple. We have to go back to the idea of a science driver program as the basis for the entire economy of the United States. That is, for everything that the United States represents in an economy. Glass-Steagall is an expression of that absolutely indispensable mode. It's always been that case. That doesn't mean we've always had that case, but anytime we were doing the right things, we did that case. We did follow that case. And right now, if you don't have Glass-Steagall, you cannot solve any of the problems of the United States. And you have to realize this, that the United States has been degenerating over the course of the 20th century and still going that direction today. So that if you don't get the package of which Glass-Steagall is a characteristic feature, you're not going to save this nation. We are now headed for hell, economically. And that also, there's a plan now in play with the water question, which is being pushed in California and elsewhere. Now, what this governor of California is doing is committing genocide against the people, not only the people of California, but this is now extended to a broader area of the western states. And what, on the edge, the rest of the United States area is now about to get into the same kind of problem. There are solutions for this problem, but the governor of California is not going to allow that to happen unless we sort of get him out of the picture. But that's what we are.
Okay. All right. We're going to take another questioner up here. Here we go.
Hello?
Hello. Okay. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, I'm getting the person on here, I hope. You there?
Yeah, this is Glenn from Washington State.
Okay.
I'd like to ask Mr. LaRouche if he would help with the promotion of Franklin Roosevelt's Columbia Basin project as a national project, and if he would help assign people to help me on promotion of that.
Yes, but that's just a general statement, generalization, when said that way. There are very specific approaches to carrying that out. And what is necessary is to go into a discussion of what those specific approaches are. The basic thing is that the human species realizes itself as being human only through the creative powers of the human individual mind, the human mind in general. Now let's take, for example, right now, we allegedly have a great water crisis in the United States, and the West Coast is, of course, the leading subject on this matter currently. But those people say we can't do this, we can't do that because we're running out of water. Now the fact of the matter is we are not running out of water. The supply of water is not located merely in the Earth area. As a matter of fact, the Earth area is a relatively small part of the total water supply which the United States, for example, and other nations and so forth have available to them. The basic system for the water system of the United States is that it is merely a part of a much more powerful system called the galactic system. The point of fact, the existence of humanity depends upon factors of the galactic system, of which water supply is the most obvious. And the struggle now is to get people to understand how to get the juice, shall we say, out of the galactic area, which is there waiting for us. How do we tap into that and bring it into play to solve our problems? And the future of mankind depends entirely on the promotion of that revolution. It is a perfectly feasible revolution. It has a precise scientific set of characteristics. This thing was a follower of the work of Kepler. The great Kepler, who was the first person to understand how the galactic system was created. He didn't have a complete view of the galactic system, but now that system is known. The galactic principle is known, and it's also known that the water on Earth, it depends upon the management programs prescribed for the galaxy, not the local the water system. And so if we go at that kind of problem, that kind of thinking, which is quite feasible, it's not easy, it's difficult to get through the process because it requires a lot of steps of work in order to get mankind in the ability to really realize what the water system is. But we have already existing for us now. We have the access to the kind of technology, which is known technology, that is in terms of the system. And all we have to do is get a little smarter and learn how to apply ourselves to that.
Okay, great. All right, we got a lot of people on the line here. Lynn, we're going to take another person. Here we go.
Okay. Waiting.
Okay.
Hello, this is Joseph from Michigan.
Okay.
And my question is, the voter fraud with the electronic voting still going on. Now the Democrats are controlling that, and so how do we get a hold of this? I can agree with you if we go back to just a single ballot to get a fair election.
Well, I think you've got an option that's coming up this Saturday. It's called O'Malley. Now, I've gone through the list of candidates that are known to me. That is, all the present candidates for election known to me presently. Now, this guy, O'Malley, is right now the only probable case of a candidate qualified to lead the nation in solving our problems. Without that kind of approach, the approach he represents, we don't have much of a chance in the United States of our people. So that's independent. We don't have anybody else on the job right now who is committed to O'Malley's position as a presidential candidate. I also look around the issue, and I find the other guys who were considered presidential candidates, they're not all bad people. That's not the point. But they do not have the kind of commitment that's needed. It's just like what happened in the 20th century. We had all these guys who were called scientists, and there was only one scientist in the 20th century who was really competent, Einstein. The rest of them were all a little bit kooky, and were not really up to the job. So the issue now is, do we know that? Well, we do know some of that material. We do have some insight into that. And O'Malley so far has indicated that he's a man who's committed in that direction. Now, I can't guarantee him. I don't have that kind of insight. But I do have a good idea of what he's been doing. And I understand how he's operating. And what I understand more than anything else is that all the other ones are no good. That they're not necessarily bad people. They just can't do the job which desperately needs to be done. And so I would say we would encourage O'Malley, and we're looking for a candidacy, presidential candidacy, which in practice can deliver an organization of leading political forces inside the United States, regroup those forces, and bring them into a unified play. That is, create a real presidential system of the type that we have done a number of times in the U.S. history. But that's what we require. We have to get a presidential system. You need a good president, otherwise you don't get a good presidential system. But we need a presidential system, a president who can represent that. And that is our best shot for everything.
Okay, here's another person up here. See if I can get my button to work here. Okay. All right. Didn't quite work here. All right, we'll take another person up here. All right, here we go.
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Lynn. This is Alvin from the Bronx. Lynn, I wanted to. Earlier today, I received an email from the organization of the 28pages.org. According to them, they're announcing that Rand Paul and Wyden, the Democrat, two senators, will be introducing a resolution to the Senate next week, joined by Graham and the other members of the House that have put that resolution forward, and that this would be happening on June 2nd. Now, I don't want to get too excited about this. We know that these things can get stuck, but I was wondering, because this is from the Saudis to the British to the outtake of Obama, this would seemingly happen very quickly. So I was wondering if you could tell us what your thoughts are and what we should be doing in New York to get people like Schumer, who should know better, to support this resolution.
I think, Schumer needs a little bit more encouragement because he has not had much encouragement recently under the presidents. So that has to be taken into account. But on the Rand Paul thing, Rand Paul has a very specific feature in his program which is prominent at this time. Now, I don't know about Rand Paul's policies in the broad sense. In other words, I couldn't give him A marks, 100% marks, all the way down, up and down. That I can't do. But I do know that what he has committed himself to, as stated, is something which is absolutely valid. It's not the whole kabaz. It's not everything. But it's an element which when, let me just accept my answer to your question this way. Look, the creation of a presidential system, which is in accord with the best practice of our system of presidency, requires a broad team of people gathered around a figure we call the president. But there are many people who have to contribute to make up the combined effect which represents the kind of president we need. We need a chief executive, yes, and the chief executive has to be a good choice. But the efficiency with which the good choice can be realized depends upon bringing a team together around that presidential candidate. That is what we must do. And therefore, Rand Paul is one of the figures you're going to look at right now and say, Rand Paul, are you really real? And because I think a lot of people in the United States are looking at candidates and looking about them and say, is this guy really real? And I think Rand Paul, at least on this score, and his behavior on this score, is rather real. He's doing good things, and what he's doing, what he's not doing, I'm not sure about. But what he's doing in the case right now is good. What we need, however, we need to create a presidential system. And a presidential system is not a president. Very rarely can a president be successful, even if they're the best quality. You need a best president, the best option. But you also need a combination of people whose combined talents, brought together in the proper way, gives you a real presidency. Something like Franklin Roosevelt did.
Okay, great. Okay, terrific. Okay, so we got a lot of people up. We'll take another questioner up here.
I'm Ken from Donnell, and I just want to say I thank you for your service and your truth telling throughout the years. And also, I just wanted to get your take on the situation concerning Ukraine and Donetsk and Putin and the constant ceasefire and the breaking of the ceasefire and the United States role in backing the Ukraine government, and also the situation in the South China Sea with the surveillance plane, and China continue to warn the U.S. and this constant escalation, which can lead into a thermonuclear situation. I just wanted to get your take on that.
Absolutely. You've got my attention. No, but the point is, like the China Sea situation, we must get rid of Obama. We must impeach this guy, throw him out now. I mean, this is not an eye of replacing him or waiting for the next president. You've got to remove Obama right now. And we've got to find the members of Congress and so forth who have the guts to do that. What you're looking at, if Obama were to succeed in the direction he's going, you're going to be in very soon a thermonuclear war from which we don't know who could survive, if anyone. So therefore, Obama must be slugged out of his position. Because as long as he's there, and with his evil intentions, and I can say frankly, his evil intentions, you haven't got a chance. So this guy has to be ushered from office. And we have to have at least an emergency replacement, which may not be perfect, which may have a lot of faults, but we've got to get rid of this threat of a global thermonuclear war. Because if such a war breaks out, and if a war of that type breaks out, we will have a thermonuclear war. And the chances of survival of the human species on this planet is very limited. I'm not talking about something in the long term. I'm talking something about in the very short term. We are already on the edge. With Obama as president, we are already on the edge of the extinction of the United States, the people of the United States, and other people in other parts of the world as well.
Okay. All right. I'm going to take another questioner up here.
Do you hear me?
If you can speak a little faint, but try to speak as loud as you can, okay?
This is Kay from New York. I have been reading that Russia wants to destroy our grid. I have been reading that ISIS wants to destroy our grid. I don't think Russia would benefit by it, but ISIS likes to destroy, and that's all they want to do. If that happens, is the Tesla electrical system something that could be used to replace what we have now fairly quickly? And do you have people who give thought to this?
Okay, all right. Did you, Lynn? She was basically asking about the a claim that there was a threat to the electrical grid. She said that certain people say Russia wants to destroy our electrical grid, and other people say that ISIS wants to destroy our electrical grid. How do we deal with the threat to our electrical grid if it's attacked? That was her question.
Oh, I know. It's a reasonable question, but I think I would approach it a different way. Yes, as long as we have this situation, remember the policy is the British Empire. This has always been, in modern times, our chief enemy has been the British Empire. The British Empire is the enemy of civilization in general. Even uncivilized people are victims of the British Empire, which is the usual fact. So what the problem is, we must remove those factors in international policy which mean the threatened extinction of the human species. And the threatened extinction of the human species is something you have to talk about when you hear the name of Obama. You also have to realize that the British Empire is the chief force of evil on this planet, and has been that for a very long time. And therefore, what we need to do is take that into consideration. Now, what we have is, what are the alternatives? Well, we have a thing called the BRICS, parts of the planet Earth. China is one of those cases. China is a leading force, a positive force as a leading force on the planet right now. It has a greatness which is absolutely amazing. India is now, despite the great starvation from the heat wave and so on, is a great nation. It's organized as a great nation. There are other parts of the planet, some parts of South America, some other parts of the planet, which are very good places. Russia right now is a good place. It's not perfected, but you have to look at its history and see what it's trying to crawl back out of, and then you understand it. Now, what we need to do, we're going into a new idea of mankind. It's not exactly a change from the old way, but we know now that nations cannot just live with arbitrary attitudes toward other nations. That we let the nations live their own way, but let's find a way of concert, of bringing our intentions together, one nation to another. Let us have different tastes. That's all right. What we want to do is learn by working together as nations. We start from what we think is best for our nation, and we hope the other nation will do the same thing. But we may all be wrong, but not perfectly wrong. But we will, in this process, learn how to converge on things which are the things that the future of mankind requires. And of course, our United States is actually, as created by people like Alexander Hamilton and his leadership. That's the model. For me, that's the model. It's the best model. The problem is we had a bunch of bum presidents. And they were brought in largely by influence of the British Empire. Manhattan, for example. Manhattan is actually one of the greatest things in the United States, despite all the bad things that go on in Manhattan. And I can tell you, I know those bad things that are done in Manhattan. But we have within Manhattan, we have a intention in part of the population which radiates into the best features of the New York state, existent form. And we know other parts of the nation, of our nation, which similarly would like to go in that same direction. So the way we have to approach it is that we have to say, well, we've got to decide what the bad things are, and we've got to recognize what the shortcomings are, apart from the bad things. And we have to bring a set of relations among nations where the nations will live at peace with one another while looking at their common mistakes and trying to correct them. That's the history of mankind. It's called progress. And the principle has to be the principle of progress.
I have to push one button here, which somehow got turned off here. Hold on one second.
This conference is being recorded.
Okay.
Hello?
Next question. Okay, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, hi.
Okay.
This is Derek in California, and I just wanted to commend you, Lyndon LaRouche, and your organization for phenomenal success and leadership, and it's really it couldn't come at a better time. I have sort of a bifurcated question. It's really one question, but it's sort of bifurcated, so I hope you'll be able to answer it. Okay, so I saw the Queen of England speak in front of her House of Lords and Parliament, and she said that her government is going to write a Bill of Rights for the United Kingdom. Since the English, as far as I can tell, wrote the Magna Carta, and the Bill of Rights is based on the Magna Carta, didn't they already have the mind or the will to write a Bill of Rights? Why the change? And then the bifurcated part is, and I'm also wondering why she is looking forward to her visit to Germany next month.
So you want Lyndon LaRouche to comment on the Queen of England?
Yes, please.
I get that.
Okay.
Well, the point is, in the legacy, the British monarchy has not been a good thing. The complications are that some of the Scottish are not so bad, some of the Irish are not so bad, but the problem is that the British system is, as Shakespeare's account of the history of Britain, about the history of England, is a pretty good picture of what the problem has been. But also it means that the creation of the British Empire as such has been nothing but a pestilence to mankind. The British system, as an imperial system, should not exist, because there's no way that you can have a good system if the current monarchy, or tradition of the monarchy, continues. And therefore, the problem is exactly that. The problem lies not with the English people, not with the Scots, and not with the Irish. The fact is they are slaves of a certain kind. They don't have their own rights. They don't have their own abilities. They are simply tools, and they're trying to survive in the role of being the tools they've been made to be. And I know a lot of the people from Britain, my age enables me to know that. And that I draw a conclusion on that basis. I find that often, many British citizens, English, Scottish, and so forth, I find it very agreeable. As a matter of fact, I have some ancestors that come out of that breed. So I can't be too afraid about those guys. But the problem is the British Empire, the monarchy system. The monarchy system as it has existed, since our founding of the United States in particular, is something we want the planet to be free of. And the sooner it goes, the better.
Okay. All right. So let's get another questioner up here. Okay. Hello?
Hello. I'm here.
I know. I'm waiting for the other person. If you're speaking, you're not. You're still muted. There's someone I've are you there? Okay. The person does not. We'll have to go on to someone else here. Let's try another one. Okay.
I would like to ask a question of my teacher.
Okay, you're going to have to speak way louder because I cannot hear you one iota.
All right. The question is central around what was just said, that the Britons are tools of an imperial system. That is what is basic. And the question is, are the words Romans and British covers for the priest-king bank hegemon, for the imperial Israel with Bank Khazar? Are the words Roman and British covers? And if they're covers, is a more accurate description Vatican Empire, Israel Bank Khazar, is a proxy for science?
All right, I think I get I think she was asking about the relationship between Roman Empire and the British Empire. It was very faint, but that was the basic question.
I think the evil is about the same. I think the Romans were better at mass killing and slaughter. They have a less bad situation. But the British system has been the most cruel, the most evil system on the planet for all people. I mean, you could take cannibals. You might be able to make excuses for cannibals, but you could never make excuses for the British Empire.
Okay. All right. Let's take another person up here. All right.
Yes. Lynn, thank you for your work. I'm an activist. Also, my name is Kathleen, and I'm from West Virginia.
Uh-huh.
And can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. One thing that bothers me a lot is the lawlessness in our government. The highest office, like Obama in office, he's always disobeying the Constitution, but many of the elected officials underneath him are also the same way. And they don't seem to live by the laws of the land. They make them up as they go. I think this is probably the second most important issue going on in our country today, excluding the Glass-Steagall. I recently heard from a senator's office that Obama is about to be impeached, but it's going to happen very quickly. Can you comment on the lawlessness and on the hearsay that I heard about Obama being impeached very quickly?
Yeah, well, Obama is a disaster. He's a disaster for the United States. Every day he lives right now is another day of disaster for many people in the United States. And the problem is also more broadly is that what's happened in the terms of for example, the system of the Congress as such. These institutions, which we were so proud of at one point, or up or down, like Franklin Roosevelt, for example, one of our most famous achievers in history. We don't have those around anymore. And the reason we don't have them is because the system of government, as it's managed now, doesn't allow good presidents to occur. I've known some good presidents personally. I've admired some of the work they've done. Some of them are fairly recent vintage. But if you come to a Bush, I would think a burning bush is a bad smell, essentially. And we've had many presidents who were bad. I mean, really evil. Most of them were British agents. For example, the Bush family. Prescott Bush was a advocate of Hitler's policy. And suddenly he was still living when his sons came along, and they got to be known as the Bushes of the presidency. And we got a result from the Bushes of the followers of Prescott Bush, which has been pretty much a benchmark of the evil that has occurred to the United States since that time, especially, that period. So what we have is we have a system of presidency which has some good presidents in them, but somehow the presidency itself failed to function. I think certain presidents I know of, they were good persons and good presidents, but somebody else was in the woodwork and destroying and corrupting all the good things. And that's been the case. Obama is probably the worst president on the record in the United States. That's a good example of that. But all the Bushes are very bad. They've always been very bad. As bad as stupidity can make them.
Okay. All right. Here goes another one. Another question.
Hello.
Good evening.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi. Eli out here in Southern California. Lyndon, it's a pleasure. Lyndon, I have a question. I've been listening to several of the recent discussions over the phone over the last month or so, and I'm bewildered because it appears to me that relative to the drought that you cited here in California, that on one hand, it doesn't appear that LaRouche and company is acknowledging that humans are the underlying problem, or that humans, by changing their behavior, represent a part of the formula for the solution to it. When we have, for example, the burning of the jungles in South America, the impact that has had on the northern hemisphere is a rather documented scientific fact, and yet I hear about these galactic solutions which seem to be rather ambiguous at best. I thought you may be able to comment upon that.
Well, there's nothing wrong about the galactic solutions, if they are solutions. It's obvious, huh? No, the problem has been that mankind in a primitive condition tends to be a destructive force for mankind. That progress as such, real progress, the evolution of man's skills, the scientific progress, these things are essential. And these are the things that make mankind different than beasts. So therefore, there are certain things that are essential. Progress, scientific progress, and so on, is absolutely essential. For example, without a galactic system, you are not going to have a successful population of California. Because with the present trend, which is going into a long trend, and if we sit there and just watch with California and don't change it in the needed way by applying galactic principles to the galaxy, California is dead. Because it will be a long time before the territory called California today would come back. So therefore, progress is essential. And the progress of man and man's ability to make the changes. For example, what's the problem with the water in California? Two things. First of all, what was good beforehand, when the previous governor of California was there, but after the eighth man got in there and some other people, California shot itself to death by bad presidents, by bad governors. And that's been the recent case. But on the broader sense, the problem is we do need to go to scientific progress, scientific principles. The problem is that under the 20th century, the economy of the United States has been degenerating at a rapid rate. Look at the condition of your people in the United States here. What's their condition comparative to what the condition had been earlier? The United States, the people of the United States are in the worst condition they could possibly be up to this time. Oh yeah, they had better times before, but they don't have any progress anymore. And our own people are insane. Our children in the 20th century? School children and products of school education are becoming more and more worthless in terms of their powers to accomplish things. They don't know what to do. Look at the condition of our labor force today. What condition are they living in? What kinds of life are they living? How much better the life was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Everything is much, much worse than then. Why? Because we didn't continue progress. But the problem is you've got to use real progress, not imitation progress.
Okay, get another question up here. All right.
Hi, good evening. This is Dennis in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia.
Yeah.
I have a simple question. I'd like to elaborate just a little bit on it. How do we actually get this guy out of office? What are the steps we have to take? Last year, my wife and I, in fact, it was Kathleen who spoke to you a few minutes ago, we had 2 different copies of articles of impeachment that we tried to present to members of Congress, and nobody had the gonads to even talk about this subject. The only encouragement we've had recently was we talked to one of the staff members of Senator Joe Manchin, our state senator, and he said the impeachment is going to happen. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen quickly. Does he know something that we haven't heard about yet? I'm finished.
I think the intention is for that to happen. I think what you're having is the O'Malley nomination, which is coming up on Saturday, could be a turning point. That is, it could be a turning point, not because it is the question of whether he be reluctant or so forth to do what he's promising, but the point is he might be prevented from doing it. But as I've watched this thing carefully, O'Malley's, on the scale of things, is the most prominent figure who might save this nation as president. Now, that would mean he would have to have not just himself, he would have to have a team, because a single person as president is not a very effective person, because the other guys may be going the other direction. But the point is that we have the possibility of winning this thing. And what it takes what's sometimes called guts. But guts is a crude word, and it may not really tell you the real story. The real story is, are you enabling and encouraging our citizens to do the kinds of things that will produce the kind of results we want? I think we can do it. I know we can do it because I've seen it being done before. And our problem has not been that we were a failure. The problem is that we let people get into power, like the Bushes, the Bush family. We let those kind of bums in the 20th century, we let them run the place for a while. And I can tell you some things about the Bushes will terrify you, but that's all true. So therefore, the problem is we have to have 2 things: the guts and the teamwork to create a leadership, a political leadership, a practical leadership inside the United States. And we have to pull people together and get them to decide they're going to stick together for that mission. And I think the time has come when we might get lucky, because if you look at what's happening in South America, if you look what's happening in China, if you look what's happening in India, looking at other places like that, progress is in progress. It's here. And it's here in a good part of the planet. The majority of the planet wants progress. And we can pull the team together of those who already want progress. We have the means, potentially, to create a better way of living very soon. And it's going to take a lot of work to make that thing happen. That's all. That's our best shot. I'm confident that what man is capable of doing in terms of science, in terms of understanding of mankind himself, in terms of coming to understand what the solar system is all about. Mankind has those powers. Mankind has developed those powers. We can develop them. But it's difficult to educate people if the teachers aren't there. Or if you have fake teachers there. So the students are helpless. If the social life in cities, other communities, is degenerating, it's very difficult to maintain a civilization. But what we must do, if we're human, really human, we must be devoted to doing the things that will bring that kind of progress into being. That's what I've been doing most of my life. And I can tell you, from my experience, it works. We just don't have enough people doing it right now.
Okay, well, that's a good call on our activists here to help recruit some more people, Lynn. So we'll keep the dialogue going. Here's another question.
Okay.
All right.
Good evening. My name is Stan. I'm calling from Queens, New York, and I'm a Russian American from St. Petersburg. And this question relates to Ukraine and the events around it. Mr. LaRouche, I do respect you in many ways, and I agree with your economic assessment of the U.S. cultural, educational, etc. Conceptually, I think we understand what needs to be done in terms of science and policy. Now, we understand that there are facts that are available to anyone, including video footage of what's going on in Ukraine, the shelling of civilians, the use of Nazis, which is being covered up, and considering there are facts proving U.S. toppling governments and creating chaos and sponsoring radicals globally, which are in fact illegal. As far as I understand, what can be done to stop this mob mentality? Practical, realistic, effective steps, which will definitely achieve results, eliminating the model of perpetual war so that no one can take over and continue the legacy.
We're coming to a point right now at which the decision to be made that will secure the future of mankind as opposed to the continued destruction of mankind is now on the table. Take the case of Ukraine. Now, I have some fairly intimate connections to people in Ukraine. I also have quite a bit of history in terms of Russian history, of modern Russian history, especially. I know what's happening. I know, the Ukraine is, probably well, as I do, that the Ukrainians are not what they are presented to be by the Ukrainian government. And I know people, leading people of the Ukraine, who agree totally with that. We have a bunch of Nazis, and they were actually Nazis on the record during the Hitler period. These Nazis are running Ukraine today. How? Under the direction of the British Empire, that is the British monarchy, and under other forces like that. I know exactly how it's being done. Now the problem is this. Let's look at it from Putin's standpoint for a moment. What is Putin doing? Well, on the one hand, he's doing everything possible to avoid a general thermonuclear war. He probably is doing almost as much or more than anybody on this planet to try to prevent thermonuclear war. Because thermonuclear war, if it were to occur, and there is no such thing as non-thermonuclear war in terms of this kind of warfare, you have to use those weapons, those kinds of weapons, or you lose the war, unless you can stop the war. And to do that, you have to get rid of the Nazis. And I think you do know, or from your experience, that Ukraine is now under the control of a bunch of Nazis. that doesn't mean the Ukrainians are Nazis. It means they're intimidated into playing a role of trying to survive, despite the fact that the government of the United States, among others, under the current president of the United States, is promoting a Nazi regime in Ukraine. And we're at a point also, similarly, to be realistic, we're at a point where if Obama stays in the presidency for much longer, you're going to have a thermonuclear war, and there won't be any coming out of it, of civilization. So getting rid of Obama, getting him out of there, and getting people like Albert, getting in the British Empire out of there, is absolutely essential. Because the rest of the world, which is being more and more influenced by the BRIC movement, as in China, as in India, as in some nations of South America, the movements there are the kind of movements which are needed in order to build a decent condition of life for humanity. And I'm sure, I've studied him well enough to know, that Putin is actually trying to do a very good job with good intentions. But how can he express those good intentions when the British Empire of the Queen and company, as well as the Nazis who are now controlling Ukraine, how can we have peace? We have an Obama who wants to make world war. How can we have peace? And therefore this depends upon the intellect of people to understand that there are certain missions which the present age, the present year, the present generation must complete in order to ensure the survival of humanity for the future.
Okay. All right. We're going to take another person up here. Here we go. All right. Hello?
Oh.
Hello?
Hello. Hi, this is Stan Norman in Orange, Southern California.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
This whole thing we're discussing is very hard to grasp. But let me just ask a few points. Because, I'm a ex-engineer and I worked in strategic planning in my day. And my question is, what is the plan? Like when we worked in business, we had a strategic plan and we had an operating plan. The strategic plan is what we want for long term. The operating plan is what are we going to do this coming year? We're going to do it. What are the goals and what are the objectives? And let's identify the people that are going to carry it out. Now, I don't know if we have anything like that. If O'Malley's our man, is he going to take a month and sit down and figure this out and come up with something? I don't ever hear anybody come up with a coherent plan. So how do we get this plan and how do we make something?
Well, we do have some people who do have some good planning. But when it comes to the present system of the presidency, you go back, Bill Clinton wasn't too bad, He was stuck with a lot of handicaps, and I know him very well. Bill, we have other presidents who I've known or been associated with, and they were good guys. But what happened? The Bushes got in there. The general history of the modern 20th century United States is had too many Bushes there. The Bushes that you would like to burn, so to speak. Prescott Bush he's practically a Nazi himself. His sons were trained to think like Nazis, or sloppy Nazis, or weak-brained Nazis. We're getting more of that. Obama's a brain case. This guy is not fit to be president. Why is he there? Because the British Empire put him there. And we let it happen. So the point is coming now that the issue before us is that the enemies of mankind, the enemies of human culture, the enemies of progress, are now at the terminal end of their ability to control the planet. And they are now determined to stay alive so they can control the planet. How do they do that? By killing people. What you've got right now, let's take the case of California. What's the policy of the current governor of California? In direct contrast to his father. The present one is a killer. What's his policy? Reduce the population of California. That means mass murder of the population of California. Well, they say there's a water shortage. Then why does the current president, chairman of the state, the governor, why is he trying to kill people? His policy is killing people. He's not limiting it to California. He's got neighboring states there. You've got some people in Texas who are thinking in a similar direction. We also have a policy of a president called the United States President who works in the same direction, Obama. Now, what are you complaining about? If you're not complaining about what I'm complaining about, what are you complaining about? We're at a point that we have to fight our way through to save this nation. It doesn't mean going to a bloody war. It means trying to avoid all kinds of warfare. But it means going to higher levels of technology. But I can tell you one thing that probably most of you don't know. I'm an old enough man to be able to say that. Is that since the beginning of the 20th century, with the beginning of the 20th century, in the United States and Europe, the civilization that had been achieved over the course of the 19th century, with all the problems that existed in those periods, was better in direction than we've had in the 20th century or the 21st century presently. Why? Well, I tell you, there was one genius, one and one only true genius in physical science during the 20th century. His name was Albert Einstein. And everybody else who pretended to be a great scientist was a failure. And if you look at the history of the United States over the period of the 20th century, what we've been doing is we have been degenerating. Oh, we've made some accomplishments. We've done some things. We've built some nice machines. But something in the process was going on, a direction of development. While we were doing the good things, and some of us were doing good things, but the other guys were destroying everything for which we were working. So the time has come when what you have to realize that mankind does deserve a good future. But sometimes, if you want to have a good future, you have to fight for it.
Okay. All right. Okay, we'll take another question up here. Here we go. All right.
Hi, this is Steve Mack from New York. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead, Steve.
Great. Yeah, my question for Lynn is, should we get an acceptable candidate for presidency, how do we ensure that that candidate won't be a target of the British Empire for assassination like so many of the other past presidents?
I'm not too much afraid of the old stuff. I think the old stuff that we've been talked about in the past, that's sort of worn out anyway. You have to realize that we've come to a point, and this point in the 21st century, where all the things that were done is in a recollection of the 20th century into the beginning of the 21st, has all been a failure. So what the problem has been, therefore, is that the mankind has, in general, people in general, have lost all confidence in the future. That's why you see the kind of drug addiction you're seeing, the kind of obscene behavior which is common among our young people. Degeneration. Why? Why are the young people becoming degenerate? They don't have to be, do they? Well, maybe something compels them to do that. The point is they're trying to fit into evil. The smoking habits, the drug habits, that kind of stuff. It's destroying the people. Destroying the people that are doing it to themselves. They're destroying the idea of the future with children, real children. Huh? They become almost cannibals. And the problem is we who are supposed to be the leaders of society have in the large degree failed because we went along with the Bushes instead of the great presidents like the Kennedys or Franklin Roosevelt before that. I think what did they do? Well, Roosevelt died of old age and work. The Kennedys were murdered. Nobody's going to wait around for them to be successful. And you look at the presidencies. Look at the number of presidencies who were actually really bums, degenerates. The Bushes were all degenerates. All the Bush presidency would have been degenerates. Obama's a degenerate. Huh? He represents the principle of degeneracy. He's a British stooge. And therefore, we've got to look at take the score properly. The problem is we allowed, in the 20th century, when it turned from the 20th century before that into the 20th century, the United States and other nations went into a general direction of moral, economic decline, cultural decline. In the entry beyond that, into the new century we're now in now, the rate of degeneration has greatly accelerated. So you want to say, what's the problem? The problem is the people who are running the society. How do we cure that? Replace the people who shouldn't be running society, like Obama. And I think, in practical, I think that the case of O'Malley, it does typify a prototype of a presidential candidate who could possibly turn out to be the president who turned things around back to the way they're supposed to go.
Okay. All right. Well, we got still a long line up here, and we're going to take a few more questions. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, good evening. Right. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, this is Jim from Michigan, and talking about the 4-point program you've come up with, starting with Glass-Steagall and bringing the policies into play for moving on to increase the productive powers of labor. I see it as a problem for all stratas of the population, from the general labor right up to the people who would be the scientists. And I'd like you to comment on how we could overhaul our education program so that we could achieve that goal of increasing the productive powers of labor. And secondarily, would you agree that we should go into, like Roosevelt did at the beginning of 1942, where we had price controls introduced to stop speculation? Would you comment, please?
Yeah, sure. Well, Franklin Roosevelt was actually one of the greatest presidents we ever had. Here's a guy, you just think of it, he had this disease. He was barely able to even live. He fought like the devil through the whole decade, what better part of a decade. And he became the greatest president who we've had in all modern times. And he died of exhaustion. And partly died out of exhaustion because of what he was working against. We used to have an association with some people who were working with Franklin Roosevelt. I wasn't of any significance at that time, but I had a contact with people who were in that position of leaders in in fighting the war, for example, and so forth. And what happened is that by the process of assassinating presidents and doing all kinds of evil things, which were done by the financial interests, should we so call them, we destroyed what we had actually made through the aid of Franklin Roosevelt. And you had the Kennedy brothers. They were both very positive elements. You had other people who were more or less positive elements. You had some people in the 1980s. Some of them had some positive elements, but they tended to get shot, by assassination attempts and things like that. And then what I saw later on in the process, I saw Bill Clinton come into power. I saw him in a crippled role. I don't think he was a crippled person, but he was in a crippled role as the president at that time. And the British got rid of him. The British destroyed him. They set the whole thing up. I was involved personally in dealing with that. I was associated with him in that way. And we were actually, despite the fact we never get met directly, we were always in touch indirectly. And I can tell you, this guy would have saved the nation if he hadn't been trapped. He was trapped. He was trapped by whom? By the British Queen. It was the Queen Elizabeth II who did the job to sink Bill, to discredit him. And what did we get by letting him be discredited? You got Bushes, more Bushes. And what have you gotten since then? If you like it, you're insane.
Okay. All right. Okay, let's take another question up here. Okay. All right, sir, if you're speaking, I cannot hear you. You're going to have to see if you're unmuted. Try talking.
You're talking to me?
Yes, go ahead. It's you.
Okay, this is Ken in California, Northern California.
Yeah.
Question I have for Lynn, thank you for being on tonight. And the question I have is the Trans-Pacific Partnership Fast Track thing went through the Senate, I think last week, I believe it was. And what can we do to get the House to turn the corner and get the Trans-Pacific Partnership stopped and get BRICS substituted?
Well, I think if this Obama attempt, which is going on, I guess, a couple of days from now, right? If that attempt, which is, I find it to be a very credible proposition. In other words, I can't guarantee you what he's going to do, what all is going to come. But I say, of all the presidential types, or proto-presidential types that I know right now, he would fit the match. How he would go from there, I don't know. But there's also another consideration, that there's no such thing as a president who by himself makes a good presidency. Any good presidency of the United States involves a joint grouping. People who share a common mission. Now, how does it work? Well, you get a president in there. He's accepted. Now, once he's accepted, you aren't quite sure yet. But when he's accepted, and you begin to see him doing what he promised to do, or what he was committed to doing, then you begin to see a presidency emerging, where the teamwork among the people responsible, we see this in the history of the United States all over the place. Then you find you've got a president. Why is the president so important? Is he some miracle man or something? No, he's not that. He represents a team of people who have a destiny in their eyes looking out at the world. And that destiny increases and develops, as it did with Franklin Roosevelt. And that produces something which makes for a great nation, the United States, as Franklin Roosevelt did. And some of the people who were assassinated. Assassinated by whom? Well, key figures of the United States did that. They assassinate presidents, you know. How do you get rid of a president you don't like? You get somebody to assassinate him. And we know who the assassin types are. We know the record. And so therefore, the question is, we have to understand that it's our responsibility as individual human beings, if we can grow up to understand what this whole business is all about, as I do, then you can bring people together to cooperate, to create a true presidential team. And this is not by magic. This is a process, a social process. And if it works, if the team works, you're probably going to get a good presidency. It may not be the perfect one, but it's a good one. And the best thing you can do is get a good one. You can't get anything better.
Okay. All right. We've got another question up here.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, hi. My name is Chris Ginocchio. I'm calling from Somerville, Massachusetts. Frankly, I don't have a question. I just want to make a statement. I just want to express that it's a great honor to have you on this call, Lyndon LaRouche. God bless you. I'm a very strong supporter of you. I've been, out there organizing for Glass-Steagall, a new paradigm for mankind, and the BRICS. But I just want to say it's a great honor. And I just wanted to say that, I've been following you for a long time. I've been a student of yours. I've been watching the policy committee and the weekly report, the new paradigm. So I just wanted to say that.
Well, thank you.
Okay. Anytime.
Okay.
Take care. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Okay. We'll take another person up here. Okay.
Hi, this is Ed Carl from Wilmington, Delaware. And my question for you, Mr. LaRouche, is, you made this provocative statement about Albert Einstein being the only competent scientist in the 20th century. And I'm not disagreeing with this, but I'm just saying, wouldn't you have also wanted to add a notwithstanding Vernadsky? And I wonder if you'd make a comment on how Vernadsky sizes up in your estimation.
Well, no, Vernadsky is, of course, a different person. No, Vernadsky is a genius, a true genius. He was the first one to actually define systematically what the practical distinction is of man from beast. Because just think about it. What's the difference between an animal and a human being? Now, some people, get confused on this thing. But the difference is that the animals don't do any better than they've taught to do. It may be experience that teaches them to them. But they don't create a species, a form of species, which is superior to what the species had been before. And so he understood that principle, and he understood a lot of derivative benefits from that insight that he had. But he was one of the greatest geniuses that we have in modern times, particularly in his generation. And people still today, as I do sometimes, have wondered how this guy happened to become such a genius. And because of all the kinds of things he did, discovery, as opposed to all the other kinds of people who didn't do that sort of thing. So no, there's no question about that. Vernadsky is one of the great geniuses of modern history. And his achievements, insofar as they were achievements, have been remarkable. He's unusual, absolutely unusual. And no, he's one I've learned a great deal from.
Okay, and I think, Lynn, we're down to, this is, going to be the last question this evening. We've certainly covered a tremendous ground here, and I'm going to have another person up here. Here we go.
Okay.
Yes, this is Wayne from Virginia. Mr. LaRouche, I read the transcript from your discussion you had on what really is music, and I've had a CD of Schumann's Ninth Symphony conducted by Wilhelm Furtwängler for a long time, and I've listened to it, and I really enjoy it. Now, I'm not a musician, and I'm not an expert at classical culture, so I was just wondering if you could do us a favor and impress upon us the importance of classical music.
All right. Well, classical music is sometimes it's overrated by looking at it the wrong way. But what happens is you have to look at mankind as such, as a species, because no animal can do what mankind does, and classical music expresses in its true expression, expresses precisely that kind of achievement. Furtwängler, particularly, it probably is the greatest surviving composer who lived into the 20th century. And Furtwängler's understanding is something absolutely new. You know, Brahms was dead. The greatest composers of the earlier period were deceased. And here comes along Furtwängler, who of course has quite a family background to his knowledge and to his accomplishments. And what he did in the few parts of the decades that he lived is itself remarkable. This man was a true genius, and his famous Ninth Symphony of Schubert is as presented by him, is a real jewel. It's absolutely unique. Well, what that means is that not that he was simply the great genius of that period in music, but the fact was that so few were able to approach the level he had achieved. And this reflected a effect of a degeneration in music and in the quality of musicians. Their ability, they weren't bad ones. Many were bad, but they weren't necessarily bad ones. But he had a special capability of doing things that had not been done. He was like a continuation of something like Brahms and Mozart and so forth. So it was a continuation of something great. And he represented, essentially, with a few friends of mine who were great musicians, but he represented a quality of achievement which is relatively unique. And what great suffering I feel in my experience of music, in particular, is that we didn't get good musicians. Oh, we got people at competence, yes, that's it. But I'm talking about composers, real composers, the ones who create a mark ahead of anything that had ever been done before. And that's what I like. That's what I really emphasize. So the point is, the history is that mankind, when mankind is developing, whether in music or other departments of human achievement, the name for mankind's purpose in life is achievement, is growth of mankind. Mankind's rise to a higher level than had been achieved before. And mankind rejoices when somebody in mankind comes up and achieves something which others wish they could have. But on the other hand, they rejoice in the fact that it happened.
Okay. Well, Lynn, I think this evening you've really covered a tremendous amount in depth here, both in terms of the incredible strategic moment we find ourselves and what we have to address in the deeper sense of how we have to really improve our own organizing. And I think between last week and this week, Lynn, you've made a tremendous intervention within our political movement, and my view, to uplift people for this fight that is in front of us at this point and what we have to do for the future. So here we are, Lynn, after about an hour and a half of discussion, which we decided was going to be about the length of the call. And I was wondering, in summation, if there's anything you'd like to say to the activists and supporters who are still on the line with us this evening.
Okay, there's one thing I think is probably a very practical consideration to lay forth before us at this moment. We are now at a point where here we are in the United States. We're aware of France and its troubles. We're aware of the failures in German community and so forth. We're also aware of what the role of Russia is right now. We're aware of the great achievements of China. The achievements of China are immense as compared with the rest of history right now for this recent period, and things like that. So what our purpose has to be is to realize that mankind has a special nature that no animal could ever achieve. It's not possible for an animal to do that. Only a human being can do it. And what the conclusion to be drawn from that is that every person in the human species should strive to contribute to achievements of mankind as no animal ever could.
Okay. All right. Well, I think I'll just add in, for the sake of our Manhattan Project, Lynn, that we have coming up a week from Saturday a crucial conference, which all of us are focused on building and making a major international success. And I'm sure that the discussion we've had here this evening is going to encourage everybody throughout the country to participate in recruiting more effectively and building and creating the greatest intervention we can over the course of the coming weeks. And I just go back to what you said at the beginning, Lynn. Since I'm doing this day in and day out, I totally endorse your initial statement where you reported from Barbara Boyd the urgent requirement for the financing of this movement. So I want to remind people of what Lyndon LaRouche said also at the very beginning of this discussion as well. So we do have a recording of this call. We will get this out to people tomorrow. And again, Lynn, as I did last week, I'd like to thank you on behalf of all the supporters and activists on the call for having this discussion with us this evening. It was very, very important, and we'd like to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, great. Well, that concludes our call for this evening. We will get the recording out to everybody tomorrow, and I'm sure it will be transcribed and put up on the website as was done before, and we'll have a follow-up email tomorrow. If you're not on the list for the email, you can call the national number 800-929-7566 or talk to your regional organizer. Again, thank you very much, and we'll be back with you soon. Take care, everybody. That's it for this evening.